Meet my grandfather, a 90-year-old World War II veteran who served in the army as an infantryman in France. On September 1st, 1939, Germany invaded Poland. Very shortly afterwards, France and Britain declared war on Germany, and thus began the Second World War. On May 10th, 1940, Germany took over France, a key member to the Allies. The United States wanted to stay out of the war. That reluctance ended on December 1st, 1941, after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, and America joined the war.
Everybody was in the war. Whether you were a doughboy or whether you were a groceryman or anything, everybody was in the war. It came on us so fast. When the Japs attacked us, we had no choice, we had no warning, we had no experience in what we were about to fall into. And we knew that we had been very, very against war all the while. We didn't want the war at all. We didn't want any kind of war. We just wanted to be Americans, and we wanted to be left alone. But they didn't want to do that. They attacked us without any warning, without any justification, without any purpose except they hated us and they wanted us out of the way. They wanted Asia to be theirs. And they were willing to sacrifice everything in their country. And we were absolutely unprepared for anything like this in the world. And that was the tough part. But I wanted to get in like everybody else did because I felt drawn to it. The young men were all going, Karl. The few military people we had were very inexperienced, and we were totally unprepared. We all had to learn.
When I took this interview, I kind of discovered a few things. First one, which didn't quite strike me, that everyone was in the war. Because, well, there's propaganda throughout the war. It was a very positive attitude, and the parades were very popular, so I wasn't too surprised that everyone went to war. The two parts, however, that kind of surprised me, okay, so how I see it is compared to the Vietnamese and Korean wars, how people did not like the war, and so they denied it, didn't follow the draft, or at least tried not to, and then they get drafted to war in order for the U.S. to have enough infantrymen. It's kind of different from World War II when everyone hated the war. It's the same as both those. But the different aspect was they hated war, they hated fighting, but they knew that they had to, and it wasn't really a choice. Kind of more the thing of nationalism, civil duty, and kind of all sort of those kind of aspects. My grandfather was in high school when Pearl Harbor hit. As soon as he could, he joined the army. The first place he went to was a town called Herlesham in France. This is where his war experience began.
The first town that I came to that I was assigned to as an infantryman was a little town called Herlesham, which would be in the very rich polder land of eastern France. They had grapes there and cattle and other things. But there was one thing that had happened just before we came.
Just before he was there was a small U.S. Army there protecting the border between France and Germany.
The Americans had come into Herlesham They hadn't seen any Germans. They thought they were safe. They made a big mistake. The whole division that occupied Hildesheim ran amok trying to find blankets to get warm with instead of thinking.
Yeah.
Maybe the Germans are closer than you think. As a matter of fact, that turned out.
It is now January 5th, 1945, 5 months before Germany surrenders. And here in Hildesheim, it is one of the last major German pushes that occurred just before my grandfather was there.
I was in the town and I saw there was dead Americans everywhere. There was heaps of them. There was windrows of them. There was nothing but dead soldiers with their white bed sheets on, and the Germans had attacked at 2 o'clock in the morning with tanks. Infantry cannot stand tanks. So the whole of the division simply went amok trying to escape, and the Germans were ready for them. They killed and killed and killed. It was such a terrible shock to me to see all the dead Americans there.
But not everyone had died, however.
I had one little friend from Mexico. He had been shot, and I said, "Where?" And he said, "Right here. You see this?" He had a German bullet right through his ear, right up against his head. And he said, "That's how close it was." He said, but they didn't know what to do. They just went amok. They were green troops. And so I was a witness to that.
Battle of Hildesheim. It came out of the blue for me personally. I was surprised that, at least the way that my grandfather described it, it seemed like catastrophic. Not as bad as the Holocaust, but still very bad, with thousands of troops just dying all over buildings. I was surprised at the time there were textbooks or anything like that. I did some research, and there are museums out there for about the 12th Division, which is the big infantry that came in to defeat the Germans. But I was surprised how there was very little known about that battle. On May 7th, 1945, Germany surrendered, thus ending the European conflict. My grandfather witnessed the surrender of Germans in Hildesheim.
The whole of the German army I saw fall to pieces, and they threw their guns away. They set fire to their tanks and set fire to their trucks and surrendered just the way they were. And we were told to be very careful because the Germans had a history of being able to fight when they pretended to be friendly. That wasn't true at all. The Germans were so tired of war, they were just absolutely wanted to surrender. They didn't want any more war. And so the whole country was overrun with German soldiers of every kind, and every one of them just simply wanted to get away and go back to the life they led earlier, before the war. And that was the beautiful part of my occupancy there in France. To see the country go back to peace again, see everybody pretending to be friends at least with one another.
So, going through the entire interview, I kind of realized no one wants war. No one wants to fight. But at some point, it ends ends up being inedible. It has to happen. World War II, the big thing was Hitler. At first, we started, diplomacy, saying, "Oh, okay, you took over this nation, just stop here, and then, okay, and then we won't fight." Hitler says, "Okay," so they think it's fine. Hitler goes past it, and then we go in the same boat, same diplomacy, saying, "Okay, just over this nation, I'll just stop." And it kept on going. At one point, which is when Poland got invaded, was really the turning point when they realized, okay, diplomacy will not work. We have to go to combat, to war. This is also very different because not only did the governments kind of realize that, the people did too. I sometimes kind of wonder, it's a little debatable, but if the Korean and Vietnamese War, what if the government kind of saw World War II and thought, if we don't, in World War II, we were very late, and because we're so late into the war, including Europe, that all that damage had occurred. What if they saw that and they wondered, okay, let's jump the boat with Korea and Vietnamese and all the other communism, Cold War fights. Kind of the big picture that I get from this interview is that war really sucks, but it's required, and sometimes it just, not always, but sometimes it's just required in order to move on, especially if you have someone like Hitler.